Welcome to the Cyber Life Podcast, where we help you learn cybersecurity best practices, give you a weekly update on the latest cybersecurity news, and share valuable career advice. Hi everyone, it's Ken. In today's episode, you're going to hear from Abinash Jena. Abinash has a background as a systems engineer, as well as he's worked in GRC for large consultant companies like KPMG. And Abinash is currently in school to transition to another cybersecurity career path. He holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, and he's currently working on his master's in management information systems. He's also volunteered in the past with organizations like Toastmasters. He's certified with RSA Archer, which for those that don't know is a GRC tool, and is a very popular one out there in job descriptions if you're applying for GRC analyst jobs. So in this episode, Abinash is actually going to tap into his experience in GRC and talk about GRC careers and just shed a little more insight so that way you're not believing these YouTube videos and TikTok videos that are going out there talking about you can get a GRC job with no experience in less than a week, with, no training and all that stuff, which is complete, utter nonsense. So we're going to peel back the layers a little bit on GRC careers. Abinash will share some insight into that, and you're going to hear from someone that's really done it, as opposed to all these people on social media just trying to sell you their program. So without further ado, let's jump right in and talk to Abinash. So thanks again for coming on the show today, Abinash. Really appreciate you coming on. So for the audience, we're going to be talking about GRC careers. So GRC stands for Governance, Risk, Compliance, for those that don't know. And GRC careers are actually a very popular subject. I get a lot of questions on social media from people around that. So I wanted to bring Abinash on. He's currently career transitioning. He's worked in GRC a lot, and he's career transitioning to another role in cybersecurity right now, but wanted to bring him on and just tap into some of his wisdom around GRC careers and kind of peel back some of the information for people that maybe they have questions on without trying to sell you something, because we don't sell you stuff on the show. It's just about actually helping you be successful in your cybersecurity career. So all that being said, Abinash, can you just provide an overview for us of what GRC professionals do, regardless of the role, just kind of as a broad, high level, and why are GRC roles important for organizations?
Okay. So firstly, Ken, thank you for having me on your show. So to start with your question, it's a great question, actually. So GRC actually covers a lot of aspects. I mean, it's kind of difficult to keep it within a particular bracket, but I'll just go with the industry definition that GRC basically stands for governance, risk, and compliance, as you just mentioned. Now, the goal of GRC is basically to help organization effectively put policies and controls so that all the compliance obligations are effectively answered, at the same time proactively running the business. I mean, that's what their companies do, right? So that's the company definition, we could say. But on a very simpler level, GRC is something like, let's say in an office, we have policies, right? Like to enter a building. What are the policies? Like we need to swipe our card. So that's basically the governance. Now, there are risks associated with it, right? Like, for example, one person could tailgate and go inside the office. That's a risk. And keeping a track of all this situation that stops those risks happening is basically the compliance. Compliance is basically the measuring the effectiveness of any rule. So GRC on a whole is basically managing the governance part, the risk associated with any company, and then the compliance part. Now, the second part of your question was basically why GRC roles are important. Now, if we look at the CIA triangle, the availability part is very much in demand these days, because we want everything in our fingertips, from our health data to our bank details, financial details, everything we want on our fingertips. Now, for that, we need a framework that could make sure these risks are associated effectively, and we have controls placed for those risks. Now, GRC professional basically helps to address those situations. It helps an organization navigate complex governance, risk, and compliance landscape, making sure that everything they do in accordance to regulations and laws. So that's where a GRC professional comes in. So yeah, if that answers your question.
Absolutely. So for the for the job seekers out there that are maybe saying, okay, this GRC stuff, this seems interesting. Like if I'm a job seeker, what are some of the common job titles that you've seen out there? And I know it's kind of a broad question because GRC is an
Yeah.
entire domain, but what are some of the common job titles that I might see if I'm a job seeker out there?
Okay, so now GRC covers a wide range of function. We need to bifurcate. Like we have to understand there are nothing a specific GRC roles as such. Obviously, a person who will work for 5 to 6 years in the industry, in the risk part, in the compliance part, he could go into those GRC specific roles. But to start with, at the very junior level, a person has to become either a risk analyst or maybe a compliance analyst or maybe a person who could be a implementation specialist, like a GRC implementation person. From then he can start the code because GRC as a whole covers a lot. So you cannot start with a GRC role in specific. You can start roles specific to risk, specific to governance, or specific to compliance. Then once you spend a good amount of time in the industry for 3 4 years, then you could become a GRC professional, like where all those things will come together and you could have a particular specific GRC role. That's how GRC is generally. I mean, yeah.
So can you share, obviously without violating any non-competes or NDAs, can
Mhm.
you just share some of the daily or kind of weekly tasks that you did when you were working in this role?
Okay. So there are a couple of things that I've done actually because I started out with Infosys as my first company. So I started I started with becoming a system admin, actually system administrator, that GRC implementation specialist, actually, like a person who is to make sure the GRC framework is put together in the system so that people like a risk analyst or an auditor would use that tool. So I was certified and a certified associate in RSA Archer and ServiceNow GRC. Those are the two major players when it comes to GRC. I'm an RSA Archer and ServiceNow resource. And as my starting job, I used to implement those GRC solutions using RSA Archer. Now, once that part was done, I joined TransUnion. Then my from TransUnion, actually my actual GRC journey started, where there were a lot of client engagement. Like I'm talking about the day-to-day part. There will be a lot of meetings and a lot of communication to discuss different timelines, the review documents, prepare a plan of action, how to go about the process. And also, we don't do the risk analysis, like how a risk person go and do the risk assessment. We don't do that. A GRC person doesn't do that. But a GRC person makes sure that your risk assessment have been done correctly and all the controls have been placed correctly. So GRC person does that. So that's where documentation, knowledge sharing, creating dashboards, a lot of IVUs reports, those come into picture. Like we have a couple of calls every night to make sure like we are on the same page with the client. Then I go on and help people design the different access role depending on the privileges, different permissions, or scheduling a report to generate maybe on certain business days as per the stakeholders' expectations. So these are the couple of things that I basically do in my GRC roles. Yeah.
So if you were hiring or looking to hire someone for one of these types of roles, like what are some of the skills or well, I guess skills or qualities that you would think are essential for someone to be successful in this particular career path?
Okay, that's a very good question actually. So how do I look at it at a very different perspective? For me, I mean, technical knowledge is definitely needed. That's for sure. Like good skills when it comes to risk assessment and all. I mean, that's for sure. But what GRC basically wants is a lot of good communication skills, lot of good cross-functional skill. Like you need to have the capability to discuss a lot of things with other teams as well, because you'll be combining a governance part, a compliance part, and risk part. So, and GRC, the main reason why GRC came into picture, because those three things were working independently and not in together. So sorry, as a GRC consultant, you have to make sure your communication and cross-functional skills are really good, so that you could, take people together and get the job done. That's one of the thing. The other thing is to have basic knowledge about, certain cybersecurity issues, the ongoing situations or the ongoing incident that currently going on in the market, basic situation in those lines. So yeah, like those are the basic things I would say. And because again, GRC is a very much is basically a subject which include a lot of business analyst kind of thing, as well as at the same time a lot of domain knowledge. Now you cannot understand a third party risk management unless you have actually hands-on worked on it. You cannot understand IT risk management unless you have actually worked on it. You can definitely learn about it, IT, how does IT risk management works? What are the different frameworks? How the risks are identified? Those things you could definitely read about it, but having really good hands-on experience do play a huge role. So that's I would say you can definitely learn IT risk management, third-party risk management, BCM. So many solutions are there. You could definitely learn that. So that would definitely help. I would personally suggest you can start up with a tool, a GRC tool, like an RSA Archer. It is really good in the market, and also ServiceNow GRC. It is basically taking up in the market right now. So any of the GRC tool one can start with to know how the things are implemented actually. So that helps a lot. So yeah, one can go for that as well.
So you kind of answered part of the next question I was going to have around, besides getting certs or degrees, like how can people start to build those skills to actually get into these roles? But taking that a step further, you mentioned like RSA Archer, ServiceNow, some of the other tools out there. What are some specific projects you would recommend? So if I'm someone brand new and I say, okay, cool, let me go to RSA Archer and see if there's a free version and play around with that. Like what is a project that I could do to be able to show like an employer like, hey, look, I'm really interested, I'm doing a project, I can connect the dots in the real world with what I'm learning. Like are there any projects you could recommend for someone to do, like any, even if it's like a high level theoretical thing, just to kind of point them on the right path?
Okay, that's a really good question because when I started out, it was a complete different situation for me. I started as a C SAP developer, a .NET developer, but then I went into cybersecurity GRC team. So I didn't get any prior experience or exposure to any project as such. But one thing about GRC, what I have noticed in all these years, so as we are dealing with a lot of company risk, governance, and compliance part, so these things are very much protected from the outside. When especially the projects, everything are very much protected from the outside environment. There are a couple of dummy things, dummy projects, and all you can do. But again, that is something which is I'm not a lot aware of because it's GRC is something that you get a lot of experience when you work in a certain group and you're answerable to certain people when it comes to GRC. But when it comes to tool like system administrator, become a RSRC system administrator or a ServiceNow GRC specialist, in those scenarios, definitely you could learn those tools, and there are platforms where you can definitely use those skills to do a dummy project. So I have taken a couple of training sessions for people in my previous organization where we used to create Word documents for them where they have to make sure this particular use cases is being placed. Let's say they have to perform an IT risk management. Make sure that that is being placed, and what are the different access roles they're gonna create. What are the different permissions? All those things. So once they are done with the training, we make sure that they do perform the implementation. But that has happened inside the organization to train our resources, like company resources. But something that is out in the market, I'm not aware of because GRC is very much protected. I feel because I always when I try to research something about GRC, you have to become an RSR, member or something. Like it is very, and they also ask a company email ID. So those so many things are there actually. So it's very much protected space. Yeah.
And that makes sense based on the nature of the work.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to a broader look at GRC, not specifically just on the role, but how as a GRC professional, regardless of your specific role, how do you balance like, hey, we need to make sure we're compliant, we need to address this risk, we need to basically do the right thing in this organization. How do you balance that with the organization that they only care about business goals, staying competitive, getting more market share? So how do you actually go about balancing all of that to make sure that you're addressing any compliance requirements and at the same time allowing the business to actually be a business and run?
Okay. That's very interesting, actually. So, firstly, you have to be at certain times, you have to be very rigid about it. I mean, I know it doesn't sound good because as a consultant, you have to be flexible, but in such situation, you have to be quite rigid about it because the need for business to remain, competitive and achieve its objective can be challenging. That is for sure. But we have to strike that balance, isn't it? Like we have to have the careful planning, the integration of compliance consideration, which is the key player in the GRC. So unless a company is following all the regulatory environment, they cannot be compliant, right? So that's where the understanding of the regulatory environment come into picture as a GRC consultant. So I mean, when I talk about regulatory, requirement could be national, international, or local regulations, everything what are being available. So you have to be very much specific about it, that these are the things that has to be followed. Now, then there comes the risk assessment part. I mean, there are people who will do the risk assessment, but again, you have to oversee them. You have to oversee whether the identification of risk has been done correctly or not. And then you could look into the prioritization as well. Like, okay, if this has not been done, make sure this is done in the next go or the next cycle, so that the potential impact would be less. You have to be very much specific about those things, especially the regulatory part, the compliance part, and so there is always a dedicated compliance team. I mean, so to handle all those things. Now they do a lot of hard work actually. Now, but as a GRC consultant, you have to make sure that not for the sake of doing compliance, that doing the compliance part. Like they could avoid a certain things just to make sure company earns a bit of financial advantage. So you have to make sure, no, I mean, this could be a long term. If this compliance issue will get out, it'll be a big issue. As a GRC consultant, you have to make sure that the team or the function responsible for monitoring and managing compliance requirements, they're doing it properly. So there should be a direct line of communication between the compliance team and the GRC person, and there should be a lot of training and awareness about it as well. Like they need to understand the different roles and how it is, because again they work in separate, like they work as a compliance person. Now the a governance person works separately, or so they don't understand like what would be the what would be the negative side of the things if it doesn't go well. So we need to have those training and awareness sessions regularly with those people, so that they understand if they are missing something, it is affecting the other part as well. So those things has to be very much taken care of. Then a lot of communication, I guess, a lot of communication, a lot of collaboration. So you have to maintain open lines of communication about with compliance team, legal teams, I mean all the business units. So because we have to ensure everything is met, all the governance compliance framework have been made. So yeah, I mean, yeah, basically a lot of communication and collaboration. Yeah, so many things. Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any experience building out security awareness programs for clients, but if you do, Abinash, like what, just for those that are kind of newer to this, like what are some of the considerations you would have? So client says, hey, Abinash, we want to build out a security awareness training program at company X. What are kind of your steps or what's your thought process to work through that, without diving in technical weeds of, okay, we're going to use this tool or that tool, but just at a high level, what are some of the considerations you would want to take into account as part of that planning?
Okay, so you're talking about security assessment, right? Now, when you talk about security assessment, prioritization plays a huge role. We need to prioritize different events. We need to define what is the scope, what is the task, and what are the time we have to cover this. That plays a huge role. I mean, understanding the business, understanding the expectation, like what are the business goals, what are the strategies, what are the operations things we're covering. So having those knowledge, at the same time aligning those things with the GRC programs we have is the key actually. And making sure we leverage all the technology and automation tools that we have to streamline GRC processes. Then comes the questionnaire part. We create questionnaires for assessment. We create those training questionnaires. I mean, to make sure that people uh, covers all the aspect of it, all the aspect of the training. Like they need to provide regular reports. They need to update all the GRC activities. Transparency basically brings a lot of trust. So they have to be quite transparent about those things. And yeah, it basically covers more or less a lot of things. Uh, for example, it will. There's one thing called the business objective of GRC. Now we have to ensure that a person, even if he's technically savvy, he need to ensure that he understand a bit of business. Like, okay, if the compliance framework or the risk management is blown, what are the repercussions? So those are the things basically comes in that part of the questionnaire that we create, or an assessment questionnaire we call it. So yeah, those are the couple of things actually, just on the surface level. Yeah.
So, from your experience with resumes,
Hmm.
for someone out there that a lot of people have trouble with resumes. I've seen some really ugly resumes over the years as a hiring manager. So, are there any specific thing? And again, GRC is so broad, so it's difficult to answer and ask these types of questions. But are there any specific things that people applying for GRC related jobs, like GRC analyst or privacy analyst, are there specific things they should make sure that are highlighted, or a specific way of saying things on a resume that
Hmm.
can help them more to be more likely to get an interview versus a lot of this generic resume advice that's out there?
Okay, that's a very on-demand question, I would say. Yeah, it's very necessary actually to understand what exactly the business or the interviewer wants from you, and whenever a person sees your resume or your LinkedIn profile, what they exactly expecting. So first thing, other than, I mean, I'll not go into the domain knowledge like GRC. I am expecting the person who's applying for GRC roles obviously have certain kind of domain knowledge, but how to put that into resume is basically making sure that a lot of communication, a lot of implementation, a lot of lot of focus in the resume has been given to a lot of interaction, a lot of client interaction, a lot of communication, a lot of collaboration, all those things. Because in GRC, one of the key part of your role would be talking to a lot of people, would be talking and understanding the expectation. So that's one. The second part comes in. It's really good if you have an advantage or an implementation tool background, like any of the implementation tool. If you know that adds a lot of value because they know you have implemented those things. So it kinds of play a huge role because that's kind of hands-on experience, so that helps quite a lot. That the third part, I would say, taking accountability. I mean, as in accountability, as in a resume, how can you take accountability? That's a good question, right? So you write, what are the benefits you have given to the company? In what percentage you have given to the company? Like, you could say, you could automate a framework, like automate a workflow, like in business continuity management. There are different BCDR plans, there are BCP plans, all those things are there. Now you have to make sure how you could automate the process and make it easier for the person who is using that use case. So you have to give some real example where you have really helped the client in impacting and helping them saving their time or efficiency, or helping the organization to save some money, like making a process automated. Those are the things basically helps actually. Like, if you put those things in your resume, it do, because again, I'm assuming the GRC knowledge is common. If there are three people or four people are applying for the same role, I expect the domain knowledge is common. So what else one person can do to stand out from the others is basically focusing on this thing, like the communication part, the collaboration part, and the implement client interaction, how much things you have done discussion with the client. So yeah, like those are the things actually. I mean, yeah, one can put.
Any final advice or thoughts you would have for people interested in GRC careers?
Okay, so basically, there are people who wants to go to GRC, but they need to understand GRC is a very broad framework. So they don't need to be a SME or subject matter expert in one particular domain. They have to have some bit of knowledge in governance, in risk, and different compliance framework, all those things, and also the regulatory part. So what it helps basically is you know a lot of things, and you know there are people who do those things on a regular basis. But as a GRC professional, you have to get those people, governance people, risk people, compliance people together on a same platform. So that helps quite a lot. So if you have idea about a bit of governance, a bit of risk, how risk is managed, how it is identified, those things, a bit of compliance. So it's like amalgamation of all the three things. So you have to have good, good skills in all those three domains, so that you could get people from all the three part together. So that helps quite a lot. So people can definitely go for it. I mean, If they are into risk, if a person is currently working as a risk analyst, he can become a GRC consultant. Just that you need to maybe put a lot of effort to learn about compliance, to learn about governance. So yeah, that's how it works actually.
Excellent. Some great information you shared in this episode, Abinash. And there's a lot of people over on like YouTube and other platforms saying you can get a GRC job with no experience and no training in like 2 days or whatever, and that it makes six figures, and that's just not reality. So I'm glad you came on today to share your information, your wisdom, and really cut through a lot of that hype and BS that's out there. So thanks again for coming on the show. Hopefully this episode help some of the audience members out there that were looking at GRC. And anytime you want to come back, you're more than welcome to, Abinash.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for having me. It has been my pleasure to be here. Actually, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you're looking to secure your business better or build up your cybersecurity career, then check us out over at cyberlife.tv. That's CYBERLIFE.TV.